Oh, hi there. Oli Anderson here. You're listening to Creative Status. This is a podcast about using your creativity to improve your life. In this context, creativity isn't just about painting pretty pictures or dancing around under the moonlight with a crystal and sticking your finger in your belly button or any of that stuff. Creativity actually is just a natural drive that we all have towards wholeness and integration and acceptance of ourselves, the world, and reality. That ultimately means that anything you do that makes you more present and more whole and more real and involves you in that process can be considered a creative act. At least that's what I'm now starting to think about all this stuff. If you don't know, because you just discovered this podcast and you've made it this far in already, my name is Oli Anderson. Like I said, I'm an author, but I also work as a creative coach for people. I help people to figure out how they can be more creative or how to get better results from their creative work. I won't rant loads about that. Today's guest is Bryan Kest. Bryan Kest is a yoga instructor. He's very, very well known in the world of yoga, if you're into that. I actually found his work more than a decade ago. When I first started doing yoga, I discovered his DVDs. He has an amazing power yoga series. In fact, he's the guy that invented power yoga, or at least gave it that name. If you know me in real life, then I will have definitely recommended these workouts to you. I've probably sent the videos to you on YouTube or whatever, or told you to go get the DVD and just ranted and raved about how much they've helped me. What I love about Bryan's work is not just the workouts themselves, which are like still the best workouts I've found in the world of yoga anyway, but the philosophy that he kind of interweaves into the workouts themselves. He's got a really amazing understanding and grasp of, I think, the human condition and how we can be more human, what it means to be accepting and to live a life without judgment. You're going to hear loads in the interview that's coming up, so I don't need to rant and rave about it. This is a really good interview, in my opinion, with somebody that I really admire. So, Bryan, thank you for coming on and giving me your time. I hope whoever you are listening to this, you get some value from it. I'm pretty much sure you will. Because the philosophy that I just talked about is, expounded upon here. Other than that, I'm going to stop talking so we can get into it because it's more interesting than anything I'm going to say here. But yes, enjoy this interview. I'll see you next Monday. And Bryan, thank you again for coming on and talking to me about all this stuff. Here we go. Oh, hi there, Bryan. Thank you for joining me today on Creative Status. As you know, I have done a lot of your workouts. I spent a lot of time with your yoga videos. Just in case people listening don't know who you are or what your work is all about, would you mind just quickly introducing yourself and telling us, what you stand for and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, sure. Hey, you guys, my name is Bryan Kest, and basically, I'm a yoga instructor. But I'm a yoga instructor that has been through a lot over the last 42 years of yoga involvement, and I did a 3 video set with Warner Brothers that got out a style of yoga called power yoga that I created that became quite popular worldwide. I created poweryoga.com, which was one of the very first online yoga streaming sites, created one of the first online yoga teachers trainings, and also started the Western world's first donation-based yoga studio. So experimented with a lot of things and have had an amazing journey along the way.
Yeah, it's not really an understatement to say that you're a very influential person in the world of yoga. One reason that I wanted to talk to you today is because even though obviously the workouts that you've shared in the Warner Brother videos and all that kind of stuff are amazing workouts physically, there's a kind of undercurrent of philosophy that runs through them, which I have found to be really helpful in my own life, but which I also think has a lot of practical applications in life and in the creative process, which is the whole point of this podcast. When I was going over all of the different things we could talk about, I was going to come at it from all these different convoluted angles, but there's something that you've shared quite a few times, which you've said is the core of your philosophy, and it's this idea that yoga ultimately is about strengthening the benevolent and eradicating the malevolent. Um, could you give us a quick summary of what you mean by that before we start picking it to pieces?
Yeah, you know, ultimately, my goal for my yoga practice was health, was me
Mm,
being as healthy as I can be. Right, that was my goal. That's still my goal. I'm feeling as amazing as one can possibly feel. I can't imagine that not being everybody's goal, because that seems like the foundation of enjoying everything else would start with
mm,
you feeling amazing.
yeah.
And as the journey progressed, I realized that a lot of, if not most, all of this well-being originates in your mind state, not in your body.
Mm,
In other words, having a healthy mind is the most important aspect of having a healthy body,
mm,
right? And so then we get into what is a healthy mind, right? And a healthy mind is a calm and peaceful mind, a mind that is not producing incessant stress and poisoning the body with stress.
mm,
So what is that? What is a peaceful mind? What is a mind that's creating wonderful vibrations through the body, as opposed to sick vibrations and um, disease producing vibrations? And that is a mind that's full of benevolence. Benevolence means benevolent qualities,
mm,
right? Benevolent qualities, whether it's gratitude or compassion or humility or any of these qualities that, as a species, humans admire. It's the qualities that all the great beings propagated, whether it's Jesus and non judgment, or Buddha and moderation, and Mother Teresa, compassion, or
mm,
Gandhi, nonviolence, or Martin Luther King, equality. All the great ones propagated these qualities, right? That these are the benevolent qualities. And what I realized is that these benevolent qualities are muscles, or very much like muscles. In other words, they can
wow.
be developed or they can atrophy. So this initial search for health and wellness has led to the development of benevolent qualities, and along the way, or within all this, um, is included, a physical maintenance practice, something we need to do for our bodies, but
Mm.
also you could call it a mental maintenance practice, something that we also need to do to our minds in order to achieve the objective of health and wellness.
Wow. So a lot of people, especially if they don't do yoga, they assume that yoga in its modern form at least is just a physical thing. But actually what you're talking about is it's a mental practice as well. Maybe fundamentally and primarily that is the main purpose of it. I found in my life that when I do yoga and I, push myself to the edge and I have to, I don't know, if I can't do a certain pose initially, I have to keep doing it until I can do it. A lot of the things that I learn by going through that process are just about letting go of all these doubts and uncertainties and a lot of the malevolent qualities, I guess, that stop me from seeing things clearly. Do you think that's a fair assessment of the philosophy you're sharing?
Yeah, that certainly can be one way to describe it, and because there's multiple ways you can describe this, and you
Mm,
probably 7 billion ways, considering there's 7 billion of us, and we all have a unique perspective.
mm,
I believe it is true what you said. I mean, it's in the West. Um, we've looked at yoga as a physical practice, but that is not what yoga has ever been,
mm,
until it morphed into that in the Western world. But if you go to India, 99.999% of all of yoga there, it's not physical. It's devotional practices and meditation practices, which
mm,
means which means practices that address your mind state.
mm,
It's not surprising that all the great beings that walked on this planet didn't address the physicality, they addressed the mentality. And it's not surprising now that modern medicine is telling us that 90 to 95% of all physical disease is coming from mental stress.
mm,
You know, may,
mm.
maybe these yogis understood, what modern medicine is understanding now. If you really, really want to be healthy and well, you have to address your mind state.
Mm. I think everything in our lives does ultimately start with our mindset and the way that we see ourselves or the way that we relate to ourselves. And so, if we have an unhealthy or malevolent relationship with ourselves in the sense of being disconnected at some level or hiding certain parts of ourselves from ourselves because of shame or guilt or trauma or whatever, if we're fragmented in that way, then it ends up impacting our lives as a whole. Because we don't see the world as it is, but as we are. And so if we don't understand that and we don't have some kind of devotional practice in our lives, like yoga or creativity or anything else, that's just going to impact everything that we do. So something else that I've heard you say or read you write somewhere is that we should ultimately take our yoga off the mat. Um, how does that feed into all this stuff that I'm saying?
Well, the yoga practice, yoga the yoga practice is called yoga practice for a reason.
Yeah.
You're practicing something that supposedly, you're going to get good at. That's why you're practicing it, to strengthen it, to get better at it.
Mm,
And because you want that practice, that thing you're getting better at, to affect you at all times.
mm,
So
mm,
that yoga practice is created to transcend the yoga studio and permeate your life. It's created to develop. It's like if you are
mm,
in the gym and you are strengthening your bicep. You
mm,
go to the gym and you're doing bicep curls to strengthen your bicep. That strong bicep not only helps you lift that weight, but that strong bicep helps you in so many different things in your life. It helps you pick up groceries. It helps you pick up children. It helps you pick up grandchildren.
mm,
The bicep that you developed in the gym helps you in your life, and
mm,
and that's the same thing with everything we're doing in yoga. Actually, in yoga, the whole reason that we're doing that is to improve the scenarios of our life, to
mm,
increase the benevolence within all the moments and scenarios of our life. So yeah, we are doing it in yoga in order to strengthen our ability to do it outside of yoga. We need a place to practice. That's why they
mm,
call it yoga practice.
mm. So when we're doing a yoga session, then um, what qualities specifically would you say that we're developing that can help us with life? So you've already mentioned a few. You said kind of gratitude, humility. I would add acceptance. What kind of things do you think we're like ultimately practicing in that yoga session, yoga practice?
Well, in order for this to be physically healing as well, in order for your body to benefit from what you're
Mm,
doing, you have to also be developing those benevolent qualities. And you could say one of the qualities is awareness.
mm,
You could say one of the qualities is gentleness,
mm,
right? You could say one of the qualities is focus.
mm,
You could say, hey, compassion and gratitude
mm,
and humility and acceptance. These are all the qualities that you have to work on in order for this to be healing. Listen, um,
mm,
you know there's universal laws that you become aware of, that you
mm,
just start to notice. One of the laws is, the
mm,
harder you are on anything, the faster you destroy it.
mm,
Right? This
mm,
is a universal law. It doesn't matter whether it's your automobile or your marriage or your body. The harder
mm,
you are on anything, the faster you destroy it, right? So
mm,
right there, You listen, if you know that if you want to live as long as possible and you want to feel as amazing as possible, the last thing on earth you'd ever want to do is push your body hard. Because the harder you are on anything, the faster you destroy it. Right? So right there, basically Western fitness is turned upside down and inside out. Right? Because all of Western fitness is based on pushing and no pain, no gain, and more is better. And it's this whole fitness mentality of doing more and getting more and being more and this whole thing, right? So the first thing you realize is that's all bullshit.
Yeah.
That's all bullshit. That's all ego driven, vanity driven. It has nothing to do with the true objective of wellness. So then, what has to do with wellness? If the harder you are in anything, the faster you destroy it. But yet at the same time, at the exact same time, if you avoid something, then it completely atrophies. So avoidance isn't the answer, and aggression is not the answer. What's the answer? Well, this is what Buddha taught. The answer is the middle path, not too much, not too little. So, right, that middle path is called moderation, right? Moderation is another word for gentleness. Gentleness means touch it, but don't touch it aggressively. Don't ignore it. Don't be aggressive. Gentle, right? So then you got to start dealing with this concept of gentleness, right? Which is, you got to admit, you got to admit that that's the number one most important quality of probably all healthy relationships on planet Earth.
Wow.
Being gentle with the people around you. And you got to bring that to yourself, being gentle with yourself, right? So then you're looking at gentleness, right? How do you become gentle? Well, in order to be gentle, you have to start become aware of your actions, right? You have to develop awareness, because you'll never know if you're being gentle if you're not aware, right? You have to start paying attention to how you are. In other words, you can no longer act in a habitual or unconscious manner. You have to start becoming aware. Also, in order to be gentle, right, that means that you're not going to develop your body in a way that you would develop your body if you were aggressive. Right? So you're not going to be able to overdevelop your body. You're not going to be able to overdevelop your muscles. You're not going to be able to become overly flexible, because you can't do that stuff being gentle. For that stuff, you need to be aggressive. Right? So now you're not going to look the way your ego wants you to look. Right? Now you're starting to deal with ego and vanity issues. Now you need to develop, now comes humility. Right? Which is your ability to get out of your ego and back off. So now with gentleness comes awareness, it comes humility. So all these benevolent qualities need to start engaging in order for you to act in a manner that's aligned with common sense, with universal laws.
Yeah. I love everything you just said. And for me, it all comes down to that. Ultimately, it's about improving our relationship with reality. So those universal laws, if you're aligned with them, you have to live in a certain way. And that way is going to be a stress-free-ish kind of way, where you have removed unnecessary friction from your life. You're not putting blocks in your own path because of all your own ego bullshit and all that kind of thing. And you're constantly moving forward into more wholeness or more appreciation of life because of the choices you make, because you understand that the universal laws they're not, it's not about if they're on your side or they're not. They're just something you have to accept. And through that acceptance, that's when you can increase your health and well-being to the greatest extent possible. This is where I think what you're saying about yoga aligns with the creative process as a whole. So just in case you don't know, the main theme of this podcast is that we can use our creativity to improve our lives. And the way that we do that is we create some kind of a path for ourselves to go on, where we're basically pushing ourselves without judging ourselves and allowing ourselves to grow through the current version of our ego. And the ego is always, always, always the thing that stops us from living with those universal laws. So do you think yoga in that sense is ultimately just about that? aligning ourselves with these universal laws so we can remove the amount of bullshit in our lives.
In a sense, it is. You know what yoga really is about is becoming aware of the universal laws,
Wow.
becoming aware of the truth,
Mm,
and then
mm,
once you're aware of it, then you have a choice,
yeah.
right? If you're not aware of it, you have no choice,
Yep.
right? You're just going along with status quo. You're not really thinking for yourself. You're more acting out of this program that's been implanted in you,
Mm,
right?
mm,
So a lot of people are they're just programmed. See, there's a universal. Well, I don't know if it's a psychological law that says the more you see something, the more you believe it.
mm, mm,
Right. So, we all grow up seeing things a certain way and we start believing in it without questioning it, right?
mm,
Like
mm,
we believe what a man is, or we believe what a woman is, or we believe how we should be,
mm,
or we believe how we should look, and we start believing this is beautiful and this is not beautiful. It's all about cultural concepts, you know.
mm,
It's
mm,
like
mm.
it's like people see, they don't see their aging process as beautiful because we live in a culture that honors
Yeah.
the most ignorant, inexperienced, impetuous group of people on earth, the young people,
Yeah.
right? And we discard the wisest people in our culture, the old people. You've never seen a 70-year-old on the cover of a fashion magazine or a
Mm,
70-year-old starring in a TV show. It's like we kind of discard them. They're no longer beautiful, and so we start believing this, and then we start getting older, and we think we start thinking there's something wrong with us, and because this is the program. Like, we've been programmed all kinds of things. We've been programmed how to act. We've been programmed what's right and what's wrong. If someone lets out a big burp, you think it's disgusting because you've been told that's disgusting, right?
mm,
Or maybe you look at yourself in the mirror and you
mm,
have judgmental or critical thoughts about the way you look because you've been told what's beautiful and you don't fit that image. So we basically been programmed, and then we go along with this program not questioning it, right? and,
mm,
and this program is creating
mm,
everything we see in our lives that we complain about,
mm, mm.
right? But at the same time, we don't realize that we're contributing to it, that we're a player in this program. And yoga's idea is to shine a light, to bring awareness of how you are, so you can choose, like, do I want to be that way or not? And if
Yeah.
you decide I don't want to be that way, then what happens is you stop feeding mental energy and unconscious loyalty to this program that's been implanted in you. And whenever you stop feeding something, it starves and dies,
Wow.
right? So
Mm,
I call it killing the enemy, right?
mm,
It's like you start recognizing this mentality that's been placed in you by your parents, the media, the culture, right?
mm,
And then you decide whether that mentality is optimal for you or not. And if you decide it's not optimal, then you stop feeding that mentality. And if
mm,
you stop feeding it, that mentality starts to starve and die, because the universal law says if you give it food, it
mm,
becomes strong, and if you don't, it starves and dies.
mm,
Right? So in yoga, the idea is to shine a light, or to become aware, right?
mm,
And that
mm,
awareness creates a choice. So yoga would never say act this way or do
mm,
this,
mm,
right? That's
mm.
that's what that's what religion does,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? Yoga is not a religion. Yoga will never say act this way, act good,
Mm.
or act bad, right?
Yeah.
Yoga says become aware of it and then decide for yourself. And
Mm,
according to your decisions, right, you're going to have certain experiences, and then those experiences will allow you to make new decisions,
mm, mm.
and the growth starts to happen.
Wow. That is so powerful and amazing, and it's so true. Like, ultimately, that is all yoga, or in the context of this podcast, the creative process really do. They just increase your awareness of the way things actually are. And because so many of us are so conditioned by society, like you said, or we've picked up shame and stuff like that in childhood that's caused us to create a fake, unreal relationship with ourselves. A lot of people are just running around on autopilot with no understanding or awareness of what life actually is. And that's fine if you believe the whole ignorance is bliss thing. But I think on a long enough timeline, living in that way where you're not in touch with yourself and you're not in touch with life just causes you to have an emotional void inside yourself and a sense of restlessness. And then that's when you get on this kind of hamster wheel of just running around trying to fill a void inside you by trying to be more beautiful or being as beautiful as you think you should be because of certain standards, or chasing material goods, or chasing things that you don't really want in general, just to fill the void that doesn't even need to be there in the first place. This thing that you've said about choice, do you think if people don't make the choice for those universal laws and for alignment and all that kind of stuff, what kind of thing will happen in their life? Like, how does, is there an easy way to get feedback from reality about good choices and bad choices?
Yeah, well, there's for sure, because if you're not making choices, right, then you basically can't steer yourself in the direction that you want to go.
Mm,
So you can't, if you're not making choices, then it's much more difficult for you to act in a healthy manner. So here's a little example. And even when you are acting it, you think you're acting in a healthy manner. Like some people are thinking they're making the right choices because they're going to the gym,
mm,
or they're going to school to be to become a doctor or something, where they're going to have this great career and make a lot of money or whatever. Um, Even when you think you're making choices, a lot of times you're not making choices because those choices that you're making are part of the program that was implanted in you. In
mm.
other words, you're making choices you were told to make instead of making your own choices,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Because you were
Mm,
told that money is success, or you were told that big muscles is health. So you think you're making choices. People will say, I'm making choices, I'm getting up and going to the gym every day. But the question is, are you really making choices, or are those choices made for you according to the culture that you grew up in,
mm,
right?
mm.
One of the examples I give is that you would not even know if you grew up on a deserted island. You would not even know that you're fat and ugly.
Yeah, thank heavens. But
Do you
yeah, it's
understand what I mean? Like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
everything you think about yourself is not really what you think about yourself. It's what they told you to think about yourself,
yeah,
right?
100%.
Like everything that you are, or you learned, or you want, might not actually be who you are and what you want, but it might be what they told you you are and what you should want. And
Yeah.
so, that's where the unfulfillment comes in, right? That's where you talk about, you were talking about this emptiness in you. I say it's like people running around trying to fill a hole that's not even there. They just been convinced it's there.
Yeah,
Listen, since
yeah.
since the time that you grew up, I mean, if you grow up in a Christian society, Catholic society, right? I mean, basically, you're born a sinner,
Mm,
right? Like
mm,
like you're fucking tainted from birth,
yeah,
right? You're
yeah.
born a sinner. And then all along the way, you're constantly being told you're not good enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not young enough. You're not rich
Mm,
enough. You're not strong
mm.
enough. You're not successful enough. It's like, that's our society. That's the rat race. It's like more, we always need more. Like it's never good enough. It's probably why, my country leads the world in destroying the world,
Mm,
right? Because we
mm,
actually believe that more is better.
mm, mm,
And we're constantly in school, we're graded, right? We're graded. Like
mm,
you're good, you're not good. It's like we're constantly being told, they actually, when you watch television, your eyeballs don't move. And when your eyeballs don't move, you're in a very receptive place. It's called
mm,
alpha level.
mm.
And they say the average 30-year-old American has already watched 2 million commercials.
Wow.
And basically, every commercial says the same thing, right? It says, you're not good enough the way you are. You'd be much better if you had this. They even hire psychologists to design the commercials to make you feel so inadequate about yourself you have an urge to buy their product. So we're constantly being told we're not good enough, and we end up believing it, right? And so that was so we're trying to we run around trying to fill this hole that's not even there, right? Trying to get to a place to make us happy, but that happiness doesn't come from getting somewhere, because as soon as you get somewhere, then you want something else, because your mentality is I'll be happy when. At one point or another, anybody who really wants to be happy, which is really the foundation of health, right? Because happiness means that you're okay with what is, and that's the opposite of stress, right? And in order to be happy, at one point or another, everybody's going to have to say, I'm fucking cool just the way I am. And all we're saying in yoga is, let's start realizing that right now.
Yeah, 100%. Like, ultimately, what you're talking about is this idea that judgment is the main problem, actually. So there's the universal laws that we talked about, reality, whatever you want to call it. That's benevolent if you can accept it and work with it and flow with it. The only thing you can do with reality is accept it. And that applies to the reality of ourselves as well. But for whatever reason, we get conditioned by the world with all this like horse shit to start judging ourselves, judging the world itself, judging reality itself. And we become identified with and attached to that judgment. And actually, that is what causes 100% of the problems in our lives, because it stops us being happy by causing us to not accept what is in the way that you're talking about.
That's a great way to say it. Definitely.
Yeah. So with the yoga thing then and the creativity thing, I think that the main benefit of yoga and the creative process is that it helps us to detach from the identity that we have created for ourselves, to run from our own emotional bullshit and to uphold the conditioning of society and the world that we've been brought up in. In your yoga videos, there's Shavasana at the end, obviously, that's the final pose anyway. You say in the video that this pose is the most important one, and it's about dissolution or about dissolving. I always think in that moment where I get that feeling of dissolution or whatever, that the thing that dissolves is that identity that is causing me to judge myself and judge life. And when you step away from that, you can experience just benevolence in itself. Do you think that is bullshit, or is it something that actually, people can practice in their lives, which is just stepping away from their own identity ultimately?
Yeah, that is the practice of yoga, and I certainly feel that. It's not just me, I mean, and the millions and millions and millions and millions of people who practice yoga must feel the same. And yeah, that's it. But the thing is that you just have to understand that what you're saying is definitely true. But what you're saying is true, is what you're saying is. It's not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah.
Right. And so the problem is not with what you're saying. Like the reason you have a podcast is, on this topic is because, you want to espouse this truth. And the reason people listen to it is because they want to hear the truth. The issue is not with what you're saying and with what you're supporting. The issue is that to acquire what it is that you're espousing is really fucking hard.
Yeah,
right. That's the issue. That's where you lose people. It's not the concept, right? We put Jesus on a pedestal. We put Buddha on a pedestal. We put all these great beings on a pedestal because we agree with what they're saying, right? But very few people actually can follow the teachings because agreeing with it and living it are two different things.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Like who doesn't agree with the 10 Commandments? Right? I mean, it's the most agreeable thing that's ever been written. But tell me, who have you ever met that can live the 10 Commandments,
Yeah. Yeah. That's
right?
the
I
thing.
mean,
Yeah.
so this is the problem. The problem is not agreeing with it. The problem is living, and that's where we start losing people because it's
Mm,
not easy to start disempowering these programs and these habit patterns that we've cultivated, this level of denial that
mm,
we're in. You
mm,
know,
mm,
everybody knows it's difficult to break addictions. And
That's yeah.
you're talking about breaking the largest addiction of someone's life. Can you
Yes.
imagine the ferocity of the withdrawal symptoms they would have to go through? Nobody
Mm,
wants to deal with that shit.
mm, mm.
But
100%.
what's your choice? What is the choice? You have to deal with it if you want to be free.
Yes, yes. This is the thing. So I suppose the obvious thing to say there is this is why it's called yoga practice again, right? You have to keep getting back on that mat to remind yourself who the fuck you are, because ultimately, if you don't, then you get off the mat, you go out and start living your life again, and before you know it, the world starts creeping in, all of the bullshit that entails. Your relationship with yourself that caused you to be addicted to a certain version of yourself in the first place isn't really going to improve unless you're actively working on it in a disciplined way or whatever. So, what can we do to not make the process easy, but to ensure that we're actively engaged in it as much as possible, both when we're doing yoga sessions, obviously, or some other equivalent that has the same purpose, or just in life in general on a day-to-day basis. Like, how do we make this easier and let go of this addiction to our personalities that so many people have?
Well, first of all, the way I look at it is just that it's like a muscle. You're developing a muscle, and that's what you
Mm-hmm.
say you have to get back on your yoga mat every day. It's the same as developing a muscle. If you know, in order to develop a muscle, you have to use it quite often, and if you use it, it will develop. But if you stop using it, it will atrophy. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what yoga practice is. It's the incessant development of benevolent qualities, right? Because if you don't
Mm-hmm.
keep developing them, if you don't keep using them, they will atrophy. That's number one. So yeah, you make an effort to meditate on a daily basis, right? So you're
Mm-hmm.
constantly developing these and growing them deeper and stronger and so forth. But another thing that happens is you start to develop it to such a degree where you notice that you're actually able to continue developing these qualities even outside of your yoga practice, right?
Yes.
So maybe let's, for an example, you're looking at yourself naked in the mirror, and you start having judgmental or critical thoughts about the way you look, right? And
Mm-hmm.
because of your yoga practice and the awareness you try to develop in yoga, all of a sudden outside of yoga you're looking at yourself naked in the mirror and you're having judgmental or critical thoughts about the way you look, and it would be very difficult for you to imagine anything more sick and self and stress producing than self-loathing, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you're doing something really harmful, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
judging and criticizing yourself, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so in now you become aware. You're like, oh my God, I'm judging and criticizing myself. Right
Mm-hmm.
now, the awareness is there because of what you worked on in yoga. You're developing awareness so that now that awareness helps you start noticing things outside of yoga. Wow,
Mm-hmm.
I'm judging and criticizing myself. Then, once you have that awareness, I'm judging and criticizing myself, then you start to have a choice. Do I
Mm-hmm.
want to continue judging and criticizing myself or not? If you decide not to, right, then you pull your mind away from these sick tendencies. And what happens is these tendencies start to become weaker because you're no longer empowering them with mental energy and unconscious loyalty. Right? So now you're starting to disempower sick tendencies. And
Mm-hmm.
that's happening due to the awareness that you created on your yoga mat. But now it's helping you off your yoga mat.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're driving to work and you start noticing that you're rolling in angry thoughts or fearful thoughts or sad thoughts, and you say, hey, do I want to roll in these stress producing qualities? No. So you pull your mind away. right?
Mm,
So what
mm,
happens is you start disempowering the
mm,
shit that's hurting you.
mm,
But it's not easy to do because you're addicted to rolling in these qualities,
mm,
right? So pulling your mind away is not easy. Like you just start thinking, I just want to have, like, you start thinking some angry thought, like, this is what I'm going to do to this person next time I see them because they hurt me. And then you try to pull your mind away from these angry thoughts and you realize it's not easy
mm,
because you're really getting off on your angry thoughts.
mm. Do you think so we've talked a lot about how this addiction to the ego, personality, whatever, a lot of the causes for that are social things. So it's society basically wants us to think of ourselves in a certain way. So we judge ourselves according to these social standards. But I think most addiction as well is actually fueled by shame or trauma. Do you think yoga can help with that stuff? So, for example, if we have a lot of underlying shame that we're not good enough because mummy or daddy or whoever it was in our childhood told us that we were useless for whatever reason, that's going to create a version of ourselves that we'll become addicted to protect us from that shame. And then if society says, oh, you're fat and you're ugly or whatever because of certain standards, if we have that shame, then we're more likely to believe the social bullshit. Yoga, I think, can decondition us at both levels, the social stuff and the self-hypnosis that comes with it.
Yeah, well, the shame that someone experiences due to, whatever they went through in their life, whatever they heard from their culture or from their parents or whatever,
Mm,
that shame is manifesting in something called thoughts,
yeah.
right?
Mm,
Those, that shame is those are the type of thoughts that this person is having.
mm,
So what happens is in yoga, the idea is to start becoming aware of these thoughts,
mm, mm,
right? Become aware of these feelings and start to disempower them by not indulging in them,
mm,
right? So you have to go to where this stuff's coming from,
yeah.
right? This stuff is coming from this program that's been implanted in you. And what you have to do is recognize it because you buy into that program.
Mm,
And once it's recognized, then you have the choice. Do I want to continue with this type of mentality? If the answer is no, then all you got to do is pull. It's not easy to do, but all
mm,
you have to do is pull your mind away from that stuff,
mm,
because that stuff has a certain kind of food. And the
mm,
food is the mental energy you give it. It's like every time you indulge in an angry thought, you strengthen anger.
mm,
Anytime you indulge in a shameful thought, you strengthen shame. So most of us are constantly walking around every day strengthening the things that are hurting us. We're indulging in this mentality. And the
mm,
yoga is about creating the awareness that you're doing it. Because
mm,
once you have that, then you can pull your mind away. So let's say you're having a shameful thought, or you're having an angry thought, or a fearful thought, and you start to become aware. You're like, holy shit, I'm having an angry thought. So what
mm,
you do is you pull your mind away from that angry thought and you place your mind on anything in your life that's happening right now. You
mm,
become present in your life, right?
mm,
If
mm,
you're walking, you just start feeling your feet touch the ground. Like,
mm,
it's that simple. If you're breathing,
mm,
notice that you're breathing. In
mm,
other words, bring your attention back to what's happening in your life right now. Pull
mm,
your attention away from rolling in these sick tendencies, and these sick tendencies become weaker and weaker because you're no longer rolling in them.
mm,
And the thing that I like about this is that two things. Number one, that's the way everything that we've ever seen in our life works, right? If you stop feeding it, it dies,
mm,
right? So number one, it's not like you have to believe in anything esoteric. I mean,
mm,
this is law of nature. This is what you've seen your whole life,
mm,
right? If you stop feeding it, it will die. That's number one. Number two is no one's ever said another way to get rid of this shit. The only other alternative anybody ever gives is drugs.
mm,
Whether
mm,
you, whether the psychologists are prescribing drugs or you're self-medicating with drugs and alcohol,
mm,
right? It's like even modern psychology is moving in this direction. It's called mindfulness.
mm, mm,
You
mm,
know, as I was married to a PhD in psychology, you know, and she's telling me, "Hey, Brian, this is the way modern psychology is moving. It's towards mindfulness because they don't even have answers,
mm, mm.
right?" So this is what I love about it is it that it's so practical and yet it's so reasonable. It's like and there's no other alternative. Like what else are you supposed to do? You have to recognize it and stop giving it fucking food.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like the reason
And no
is,
one's ever mentioned another way.
yeah, there is no other way because actually what you're talking about is just embracing reality at a fundamental level, which is the present moment and being connected to yourself and everything else and all this benevolence and everything you talked about. It's fundamental. The reason that a lot of mainstream or whatever word we want to use, scientific theories just end up giving people medication and stuff like that is because it's just dealing with the symptoms. The medication will help you deal with the symptoms of disconnection. It won't help you deal with the disconnection itself. And what you're talking about and what we've learned from yoga and increasing awareness is about becoming aware of the thing you need to be aware of in order to not be disconnected anymore. That's basically it. I know you got to go in a few minutes. I got one more question that's kind of linked to what you just said. So to heal ourselves and to become reconnected or to start moving towards wholeness again in ourselves and life and etc, we need to get into the present moment. But one thing that I've found has really helped me from with yoga is giving myself a direction to move in that is challenging. So on the yoga mat, in fact, I think in one of your videos you said challenge yourself without judging yourself. I think both in yoga and in life, that approach can actually speed up or make it easier to some extent to deal with a lot of the things that we're talking about here in this conversation. So in a yoga session, if there's a difficult pose or whatever and you can't do it the first few times, you've given yourself a goal for the next couple of sessions or however long it takes to keep getting up again when you fall and to basically keep doing it until you can do it. If you can't do it, that's okay, but you've given yourself a direction to move in. In life, it's the same thing. We can set ourselves a vision, we can set ourselves a goal, and as long as it's real, it's not something that we've chosen as an escape from all of our shame and, or as a way of reinforcing the social conditioning. We can move forward while still being present, if that makes sense, and understand life a lot more because we're actually in motion. We're not just trying to stay the same, i.e., in our ego. We're growing through the edge and we're pushing our ego to be more aligned with reality than not. Does that make sense? So the question is, how do we move forward in life while still being present and using this kind of mindset that you're talking about to unlearn all of the stuff that stops us from being who we truly are? I know that's a big question.
Yeah, well, you know, I would just get rid of that mentality of just needing to move forward with our life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would get rid of the mentality of needing to get anywhere because there's
Mm-hmm.
absolutely nothing wrong with who you are and where you're at.
Yeah.
So the idea that we need to get somewhere, I think, is part of what's creating the rat race that's got everybody sick. You know,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's complaining about the rat race, right? Everybody's running around like a chicken with their head cut off, trying to fill a hole that's not even there. We just been told that's there. So I think the
Mm-hmm.
challenge is not in acquiring something. The challenge is in realizing we don't need to acquire anything because we have everything that we need. So, you
Mm-hmm.
know, yeah, there's a challenge. If you like to be challenged, then, you know, you're going to be really happy in yoga because there's a lot of challenges. But the challenge isn't what you think it is. The challenge isn't to acquire something or get somewhere. The challenge is to make it completely okay to be who you are and where you're at. And
Wow.
if you can be who you are and where you're at fully, like if you don't need to get anywhere because there's nothing fucking wrong with you, like why would you need to get anywhere if you thought that you were perfect? right? If you didn't think that you were broken, why would you need to change anything, right? If everything is perfect, then what's wrong? Why do you need to change anything? So in yoga, the idea is not to need to get somewhere. The idea is to, start realizing that you're perfect the way you are. And and in your perfection, in your unique perfection of who you are, as a human, you have certain desires, right? What are those desires? Maybe the desire is to become a doctor. Maybe the desire is to become an athlete. Maybe the desire is to write. Maybe the desire is to have a podcast. As a human, you have a lot of desires, and there's nothing wrong with moving forward with those desires, right? But it's not like, you have to challenge yourself to accomplish something, right? You just are loving yourself doing what you love, and
Yeah.
whatever happens in the process is beautiful and perfect, because that's also, who you are and where you're at that moment.
Yeah. When we go to the edge, so the way that I see the edge is that we set out with a load of ideas about how life should be, who we should be, should, and then we challenge ourselves in life or in a yoga session or in the creative process or wherever it is. And all that actually happens is all of our ideas end up meeting these universal laws that you talked about right at the start. And by those ideas meeting life itself, we just end up unlearning a lot of the bullshit that we have become identified with and addicted to that stopped us from accepting ourselves in the first place. And so that's why I found the challenge yourself without judge yourself thing so important. Because have you heard, there's a quote by Mike Tyson. He says, man wasn't made to be humble, but to be humbled. And I think a lot of the time that's how I've experienced yoga or life itself. Like I set out with all these ideas about how amazing I am or whatever. And then boom, life just comes along and the idea meets reality and you're just left with something true. And I think the only truth, like you said, is just the stuff that you can become aware of that was there the whole time.
That's a great way to say it. That's just, yeah. There, like I said, like we started this conversation. There's, 8 billion ways to say it, but hopefully we're all saying the same thing in our own way. But yeah, that's definitely another way to put it. For sure, you're gonna, in your desire to achieve the program that's been implanted in you,
Mm,
um, you're gonna start to have to, you're gonna, unless you're in total denial,
mm,
you're going to come across the stumbling blocks to help you
mm,
recognize
mm,
that you've been
yeah,
programmed.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's it. That's how I should have said it. So when you do these difficult yoga poses, ultimately all you're doing, you're just putting a stumbling block in your own way, in your own path, so that you can reveal what's actually true and what's not. And if you can do that without judgment of yourself, then you're actually going to be more present because you're going to experience the truth or the universal laws that were there the whole time. And ultimately, that's what it's all about, I think. Um, Bryan, we've been talking for ages and basically I've run out of time, but I just want to say thank you for coming on here and sharing all this stuff. I found it like very insightful. Love your energy and all that stuff. Have you got any final words or anything like that that you want to share just to sum this up? And can you just remind people where they can find you if they want to, do some yoga or if they want to read your writing as well and all that kind of thing?
Yeah, we have so many, blogs written. I mean, like, books worth of blogs written on our website, poweryoga.com. We have thousands of classes where people, the idea of these classes, it's yoga practice, right? It's to take you through a journey of wellness while trying to implement these concepts that we've been talking about for an hour, because you can talk about it forever, but at one point or another you have to practice it. You
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
develop the ability to stay calm in a difficult moment. Like
Mm,
calmness is a muscle. You have to
mm,
develop the humility it takes to get out of your ego and back off. You have to develop the ability to be accepting of who you are and where you're at. These are all like muscles that need to be developed, and
mm,
this is the kind of stuff we're working on. And so it's kind of like this. I call it a safe place to practice living.
mm,
So
mm,
you get so good at it that one day you can, it transcends the yoga mat and permeates your life. So, yeah, all these concepts are great, but it's like I always say, like, you could go to church on Sunday morning, and
mm,
the preacher usually says the most amazing things, and everybody in the congregation screams, "Amen." Like we
mm,
all agree with the preacher, but then
mm.
we all go back to our life and nothing fucking changes.
Yeah, yeah,
How
yeah.
come nothing changes? And the reason nothing changes is because you have to do more than agree with the preacher. You actually have to develop the qualities that preacher was preaching about.
Mm, mm, mm.
You can't just agree.
Yeah.
That's not enough. You
Mm,
actually got to set in motion these ideas and concepts that you were agreeing with, and
mm,
that's the difficult part. And the easiest way to do that, I believe, is to find a community that values these things.
mm,
Right? Because
mm,
it's hard to be a spark in the middle of the ocean. You keep getting put out. But when a bunch of sparks come together, you get a flame, and it's much
mm,
harder to
mm,
put out the flame. And that's what community is. It's people of like mind supporting each other in a certain mentality, so it's easier for you to hold on to that mentality.
yeah.
That's why the yogis go to the ashram, and the Christians go to the church, and the Jews go to the synagogue, and the Muslims go to the mosque. It's because those places support a certain mentality, and it makes it easier.
Mm, mm,
And that's what you're doing, right? You're supporting a certain mentality. That's the people that are listening to you are
mm,
being supported in something.
mm, mm. But you're right. Ultimately, it comes down to acting on it. And if you act with more people, then of course you're going to get more results, and it's going to make a bigger impact on your life because other people are going to mirror you, but it's going to make a bigger impact on everybody else that's sharing that journey with you. Bryan, thank you so much. Honestly, this has been amazing for me. I just love everything you just said about the sparks and the flames and everything. Bryan, thank you so much. Honestly,
My pleasure, man. My pleasure. Thanks for having me. It's always an honor to be invited.